March 4th, Leviticus 23 verse 1 to 24 verse 23. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, these are my appointed times, the times of the Lord, that you will proclaim as sacred assemblies. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there must be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred assembly. You are not to do any work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord wherever you live. These are the Lord's appointed times, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at their appointed times. The Passover to the Lord comes in the first month, at twilight, on the 14th day of the month. The festival of unleavened bread to the Lord is on the 15th day of the same month. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you are to hold a sacred assembly. You are not to do any daily work. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord for 7 days. On the seventh day there will be a sacred assembly. You must not do any daily work. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land I am giving you and reap its harvest, you are to bring the first sheaf of your harvest to the priest. He will wave the sheaf before the Lord so that you may be accepted. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you are to offer a year-old male lamb without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering is to be 4 quarts of fine flour mixed with oil as a fire offering to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering will be 1 quart of wine. You must not eat bread, roasted grain, or any new grain until this very day, and you have brought the offering of your God. This is to be a permanent statute throughout your generations, wherever you live. You are to count 7 complete weeks, starting from the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the presentation offering. You are to count 50 days until the day after the 7th Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. Bring 2 loaves of bread from your settlements as a presentation offering, each of them made from 4 quarts of fine flour, baked with yeast as first fruits to the Lord. You are to present with this bread 7 unblemished male lambs a year old, 1 young bull and 2 rams. They will be a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offerings and drink offerings, a fire offering of a pleasing aroma to the Lord. You are also to prepare 1 male goat as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs a year old as a fellowship sacrifice. The priest will wave the lambs with the bread of first fruits as a presentation offering before the Lord. The bread and the 2 lambs will be holy to the Lord for the priest. On that same day you are to make a proclamation and hold a sacred assembly. You are not to do any daily work. This is to be a permanent statute wherever you live throughout your generations. When you reap the harvest of your land, you are not to reap all the way to the edge of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the foreign resident. I am the Lord your God." The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you are to have a day of complete rest, commemoration and jubilation, a sacred assembly. You must not do any daily work, but you must present a fire offering to the Lord." The Lord again spoke to Moses. The 10th day of the 7th month is the Day of Atonement. You are to hold a sacred assembly and practice self-denial. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord. On this particular day you are not to do any work, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for yourselves before the Lord your God. If any person does not practice self-denial on this particular day, he must be cut off from his people. I will destroy among his people anyone who does any work on this day. You are not to do any work. This is a permanent statute throughout your generations, wherever you live. It will be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you must practice self-denial. You are to observe your Sabbath from the evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, the festival of booths to the Lord begins on the 15th day of the 7th month and continues for 7 days. There is to be a sacred assembly on the first day. You are not to do any daily work. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord for 7 days. On the 8th day you are to hold a sacred assembly and present a fire offering to the Lord. It is a solemn gathering. You are not to do any daily work. These are the Lord's appointed times that you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies for presenting fire offerings, and to the Lord burnt offerings and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings, each on its designated day. These are in addition to the offerings for the Lord's Sabbaths, your gifts, all your vow offerings, and all your free will offerings that you give to the Lord. You are to celebrate the Lord's festival on the 15th day of the 7th month for 7 days, after you have gathered the produce for the land. There will be complete rest on the first day and complete rest on the 8th day. On the first day you are to take the produce of the product of majestic trees, palm fronds, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You are to celebrate it as a festival to the Lord 7 days each year. This is a permanent statute for you throughout your generations. You must celebrate it in the 7th month. You are to live in booths for 7 days. All the native born of Israel must live in booths, so that your generations may know that I made the Israelites live in the booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So Moses declared the Lord's appointed times to the Israelites. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Command the Israelites to bring you pure oil of beaten olives for the light, so that the lamp will burn regularly. Aaron is to tend it regularly from evening until morning before the Lord outside the veil of the testimony in the tent of meeting. This is a permanent statute throughout your generations. He must regularly tend the lamps on the pure gold lampstand in the Lord's presence. Take fine flour and bake it into 12 loaves. Each loaf is to be made with 4 quarts. Arrange them in 2 rows, 6 to a row. On the pure gold table before the Lord, place pure frankincense near each row, so that it may serve as a memorial portion for the bread and a fire offering to the Lord. The bread is to be set out before the Lord every Sabbath day as a premature covenant obligation on the part of the Israelites. It belongs to Aaron and his sons, who are to eat it in a holy place, for it is the holiest portion for him from the fire offerings to the Lord. This is a permanent rule. Now the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father was among the Israelites. A fight broke out in the camp between the Israelite woman's son and an Israelite man. Her son cursed and blasphemed the name. And they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Selomith, a daughter of Derebri, of the tribe of Dan. They put him in custody until the Lord's decision could be made clear to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Bring the one who was cursed to the outside of the camp, and have all who heard him lay their hands on their head. Then have the whole community stone him, and tell the Israelites, if anyone curses his God, he will bear the consequence of his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord is to be put to death. The whole community must stone him. If he blasphemes the name, he is to be put to death, whether the foreign resident or the native. If a man kills anyone, he must be put to death. Whoever kills an animal is to make a restitution for it, life for life. If any man inflicts a permanent injury on his neighbor, whatever he has done is to be done to him, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he inflicted on the person, the same is to be inflicted on him. Whoever kills an animal is to make restitution for it, but whoever kills a person is to be put to death. You are to have the same law for the foreign resident and the native, because I am the Lord your God." After Moses spoke to the Israelites, they brought the one who had cursed to the outside of the camp and stoned him. So the Israelites did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Psalm 30, verse 1 to 6. I will exalt you, Lord, because you have lifted me up, and have not allowed my enemies to triumph over me. Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you healed me. Lord, you brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. Sing to the Lord, you his faithful ones, and praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor a lifetime. Weeping may spend the night, but there is joy in the morning. When I was secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Proverbs 7, verse 1 to 3. My son, obey my words and treasure my commands. Keep my commands and live. Protect my teachings as you would the pupil of your eye. Tie them to your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Mark 7, verse 17 to 37. When he went into the house away from the crowd, the disciples asked him about the parable, and he said to them, Are you also as lacking in understanding? Don't you realize that nothing going into a man from the outside can defile him? For it doesn't go into his heart, but into the stomach and is eliminated. As a result, he made all foods clean. Then he said, What comes out of a person that defiles him? For from within, out of people's hearts, come evil thoughts, sexual immoralities, thefts, murders, adulteries, greed, evil actions, deceit, lewdness, stinginess, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a person. He got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. Instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was Greek by birth, and she kept asking him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, Allow the children to be satisfied first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But she replied to him, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, Because of this reply you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. When she went back to her home, she found her child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. Again, leaving the region of Tyre, he went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, through the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who also had a speech difficulty, and begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. So he took him away from the crowd privately. After putting his fingers in the man's ear and spitting, he touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed deeply and said to him, Ephphatia, that is, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened. His speech difficulty was removed, and he began to speak clearly. Then he ordered them to tell no one, but the more he would order them, the more they would proclaim it. They were extremely astonished and said, He has done everything well. He even makes deaf people hear, and people unable to speak talk. Surprised by joy. Weeping may spend the night, but there is joy in the morning. Psalm 30 verse 5. What a distinctive and intriguing difficulty it was for Jesus' disciples to struggle with disappointment, reluctant to believe in case that they were believing proved untrue. They were grown men whose lives had been far more sheltered and protected, yet the experience of the crucifixion had been more harrowing than any of them ever cared to face again. Over and over again during the days in which Jesus lay in the grave, they must have racked their brains to try to find some explanation of why his life had ended on a grisly cross. Doubtless, in the closing hours of that faithful weekend, their thoughts must have turned naturally toward how they might go about resurrecting their lives. Then suddenly Jesus appeared to them. His appearance was everything they wanted, but such was the disappointment already in their hearts that they considered it too good to be true. Thus they protected themselves against the risk of being disappointed again. This is the tragedy of disappointment. It can, unless looked at and dealt with, reverberate inside us and hinder us in our pursuit of God. When disappointment is put into its proper perspective, when faith comes into its own, far from being too good to be true, one discovers that there is nothing else so good and nothing else so true. God proves himself to be not just better than our worst fears, but better than our greatest dreams. No longer believing in joy is quickly followed by being surprised by joy. Prayer. Gracious and loving Heavenly Father, give me insight into what I have been looking at today, and show me how to press through all disappointments in the knowledge that beyond the hurts I shall be surprised by joy. Amen.